5:41 local time, Strait of Hormuz. The first contact surfaces as a faint ghost on the display, barely distinguishable from background noise flickering off the carrier group's port bow. Something small, something moving fast. For less than 2 seconds, it looks like interference. Then another signal cuts through. Then 3 more. Then a whole line of them bleeding across the screen at once. By the time the surface warfare coordinator opens his mouth, the count has already climbed to 11. Multiple fast-moving surface contacts, bearing 086 to 110, range 9 nautical miles, closing hard. Nobody inside the Combat Information Center of the USS Abraham Lincoln requires that translated. Not here, not in the Strait of Hormuz. On the bridge, the captain barely moves. His eyes shift between the horizon glass and the repeater display with the economy of a man who has practiced stillness under pressure. The carrier holds its course. 2 destroyers remain tight in their escort positions, one ahead to starboard, one slightly aft to port, both already pulling more information from the water than the human eye could ever confirm. From the outside, the sea still appears ordinary. Blue water catching early sun, long shadows stretching across the flight deck. A morning that has not yet decided what it wants to be. But calm is a liar in a place like this, especially when 30 small boats stop behaving like anything other than a weapon. Inside the Combat Information Center, the contact picture sharpens with every sweep. 18 tracks, 22, 27. Then the final count settles hard. 30 confirmed, multiple fast attack profiles. That number changes everything. These boats are not following any commercial lane. They are not holding proper separation. They are not drifting accidentally across the carrier's projected path. They are spreading into 3 distinct clusters, each one using speed and interval the way a chess player uses pieces. One cluster angles wide toward the formation's starboard flank. Another moves low and flat off the port quarter. The last group drives almost directly up the center line, not targeting the escorts, but targeting the water the carrier itself is about to occupy. On the flight deck above, a tow operation stops mid-motion. A strike fighter sits chained to the deck, with its canopy open and its ladder still hanging. A deck crewman turns toward the horizon and raises one hand to shade his eyes. At this distance, the approaching boats are only hard black shapes, carving white scars across the surface. Too low for drama, too fast for comfort. Bridge, Combat Information Center. Small craft contacts are increasing speed. Lead elements now above 35 knots. That gets everyone's full attention. The first radio hail goes out from the destroyer screening the carrier's starboard side. Unidentified Iranian small craft. This is a United States Navy warship operating in international waters. Alter course immediately and maintain safe distance. No answer returns. A second hail follows. Then another, English first, Farsi second. The boats keep coming. There is nothing random about the geometry anymore. Even from the bridge, it is readable. These are not fishermen startled by a carrier group. They are moving with deliberate intent, tightening angles, forcing calculations, shrinking the maneuvering space with every second that passes. And in Hormuz, maneuvering space is already in critically short supply. The escorts begin adjusting their posture without breaking formation. Gun mounts rotate a few degrees. Electro-optical systems lock onto contacts and hold. Long-range cameras cut through the morning glare and pull tight images from the chaos. Electronic support measures begin harvesting low-power emissions rising off the approaching boats. Short bursts, boat-to-boat traffic, coordination. That is the detail that matters most. It means the swarm is not simply a mass of speed and aggression, it is a controlled instrument. 5:44 local time, range drops below 7 nautical miles. On one console, a petty officer begins tagging likely threat boats by speed, heading and spacing. Some ride bow high, running light and aggressive. Others sit heavier in the water. More men, more equipment. One contact briefly yaws sideways across a wave line, and the camera catches a shape beneath a tarp near the bow. Long, tubular. Not enough for positive identification, more than enough to remember. Possible mounted weapon on lead contact. No one overreacts. They log it and keep building the picture. Above all of it, the carrier moves forward through the water like a city that has decided not to stop. That is the part most people miss about ships of this size. They do not pause because the moment becomes tense. They continue because stopping is sometimes the most dangerous decision available. A boatswain's mate on the starboard catwalk watches the nearest cluster through binoculars. 30 seconds ago, he could only see wakes. Now he can make out hull shapes, low profiles, open tops. Men packed tightly together, spray exploding around them as they hammer through the chop. They are not slowing down, he says, almost to himself. He is right. 5:46 local time, lead elements are inside 5 nautical miles. That is when the atmosphere aboard the carrier changes in a way that cannot be walked back. The destroyer off the starboard bow swings just enough to make the message visible. Not aggressive, not hesitant, just present. Its gun mount tracks left. Its wake broadens. A Seahawk helicopter lifts from the deck of the aft escort and immediately dips its nose toward the inbound contacts. Inside the Combat Information Center, every track now has an assigned number. Every number has a priority. The captain finally speaks. Set armed response stations. Hold course. Nobody fires unless they cross the line. Nobody asks where the line is. They all already know. Out ahead, 30 Iranian boats keep closing through the morning glare, spreading wider, accelerating, pulling the perimeter tighter around one of the largest warships ever built. And for the first time that morning, the men watching from the carrier's deck can see them clearly enough to understand exactly one thing. This is no shadow. This is the opening move. 5:47 local time, the water ahead looks open until someone consults the chart. Then the problem becomes impossible to ignore. The carrier group is threading one of the most constricted operating environments on the planet. Commercial traffic lanes, restricted depths, shoreline pressing in from both sides. A Nimitz-class aircraft carrier can dominate open ocean without effort. In the Strait of Hormuz, even a ship of that scale has to respect geometry. And geometry is precisely what the Iranians are attacking. Inside the Combat Information Center, the contact picture has stopped changing in one way and started changing in another. The number holds at 30. The shape does not. What had appeared as a single fast-moving wave is now separating into distinct layers. Outer ring boats sweep wider, crossing back and forth just enough to complicate the tactical display and divide attention. Middle ring boats begin pressing toward the destroyers, forcing them to track multiple simultaneous threat bearings. And the inner group, the dangerous group, continues driving straight toward the water directly surrounding the carrier. Bridge, Combat Information Center. Swarm is splitting by function. This is deliberate. No one on the bridge needs persuading. They can see it without optics now. Dark hulls rising and crashing over the chop in unison, their wakes slicing the morning sea into converging white lines. Each cluster working a different angle, not enough to overwhelm through raw force, enough to overload the decision-making process itself. The carrier holds course. To anyone watching from outside the formation, that must look wrong. 30 hostile boats are charging in, and the largest ship in the group is not turning away. But carriers do not run from patrol craft. Not here. Not in a traffic-choked channel with escorts tight around them and aircraft equipment still exposed topside. A violent course change now would ripple through the entire formation. It would distort defensive arcs, compress safe water lanes, and create exactly the kind of confusion the swarm is designed to exploit. So the order stays what it was. Hold course, let the escorts and aircraft shape the fight, 5:48 local time. The first boat cuts across the bow of the lead destroyer at just over 2 nautical miles. Close enough to force a recalculation, the destroyer does not flinch. It answers with posture. Gun trained, cameras fixed, warning hails repeated again in both languages. No response. A second boat flashes across the optics feed. This one is carrying more men than the last. One of them is standing braced behind a mounted object near the stern, both hands locked to the frame, body leaning forward against the movement of the hull. The image is unstable through salt haze and spray. No positive identification possible, but it is not fishing equipment. Possible crew-served weapon. Contact 16, tagged, logged, prioritized. On the carrier's flight deck, the sound changes, not louder, sharper. Tractors stop moving. Tie-down crews step back from their positions. An aircraft elevator team freezes halfway through a routine check, all of them staring off the starboard side where the nearest boats are now visible without assistance. They are smaller than most people expect. That makes them worse. Low in the water, hard to track by eye, fast enough to vanish behind their own spray before a human brain finishes processing the threat. A chief petty officer points toward the nearest cluster. "Look at the spacing," he says. "They are leaving room to maneuver, room to split apart, room to make the Americans guess which hull matters most." That is what swarm tactics actually are. Not just speed, not just numbers. Options. 5:49 local time. The Seahawk drops lower over the water. Its rotor wash flattens the surface beneath it as it surges ahead of the escort screen. Nose camera feeding live imagery back to the Combat Information Center. The helicopter does not need to fire. Not yet. Its current value is clarity. It sees over the visual horizon of the destroyers, down into the wake clutter, across the surface confusion. It converts noise into targets. Air contact has eyes on lead cluster. Count 12. Multiple armed personnel visible. Details begin arriving faster. One boat with a mounted heavy machine gun. Another carrying what appears to be a rocket rack fixed near the bow. Two more with extra fuel drums or ammunition cans lashed aft. And then the boat that shifts the room. Lead contact from portside cluster just uncovered a launcher-shaped object. Repeat, launcher-shaped object. The Combat Information Center watch officer does not raise his voice. He does not need to. That single phrase changes the weight of the air. The destroyer to port angles outward to widen the defensive ring, just enough to deny a direct approach to the carrier's flank. Its wake curls hard white behind it. The movement is precise. The message is not subtle. You are not getting closer without cost. The Iranians keep pressing anyway. 5:50 local time, range to nearest contact, 1.8 nautical miles. The swarm is now close enough for every ugly detail to become visible. Men crouched low behind shield plates, faces wrapped against the spray, weapons slung across their backs. Boat hulls slamming wave crests so violently that spray erupts over the bows and blows backward across everyone aboard. The whole mass of them looks like it is operating right at the edge of control. Not losing it, just riding it. That is what makes them genuinely dangerous. Willingness to live at the limit. Bridge receives another update. Closest point of approach on 3 contacts now below 1,500 yards and shrinking. For a moment, nobody speaks. Then the electronic warfare operator breaks the silence. Short-duration radar sweep from starboard side lead element. Low power, could be fire control queuing. Could be. That phrase hangs in the air for half a second. In a situation like this, half a second is long enough. The captain looks through the bridge glass at the nearest cluster, now emerging hard from the glare line, and gives the next order. Graduated response authorized. Warning line is crossed. No one celebrates this. It is not relief. It is simply the end of one phase and the beginning of the next. Outside, the Seahawk banks hard and drops even lower over the inbound boats. The destroyers tighten their sectors. Gunners settle behind their sights. The carrier continues on course, massive and steady, while 30 Iranian boats keep closing into the narrowing water around it. There is still time for them to turn away. None of them do. 5:52 local time. The first shot is not the loudest sound on the water. It is a warning flare. A bright streak launches from the starboard destroyer and cuts low across the morning haze, arcing down ahead of the lead Iranian hull. For half a second, the red glow reflects off spray and steel. The message is impossible to misread. Turn away now. The boat does not turn. It keeps coming. Bow high, engines screaming, throwing a hard wedge of white water behind it. 2 more boats surge with it, using the flare as a reference point rather than a deterrent. One peels slightly right toward the destroyer's outer screen. Another drives straight into the narrowing gap between the escort and the carrier's projected track. Inside the Combat Information Center, the picture compresses all at once. Lead contacts inside 1,000 yards. Port cluster accelerating. Starboard inner group maintaining intercept. No one is speaking fast, they are speaking clean. Then the first hostile act becomes unmistakable. A flash breaks from one of the boats in the starboard cluster, small and sharp, low over the water. A fraction of a second later, something strikes the sea off the destroyer's bow and kicks up a narrow column of white spray. Not a warning shot, not a misunderstanding, the line is gone. Engage designated hostile contacts. The order moves through the formation like current through wire. On the destroyer's starboard wing, a gunner opens with a short controlled burst from a mounted heavy weapon. Not a spray, not panic fire. A measured line stitched across the surface ahead of the lead boat, then directly into the hull when it still refuses to break off. The rounds hit low, the boat lurches sideways. Its bow digs hard into the water. One engine erupts in a burst of grey smoke. A second later, the hull rolls to port and disappears behind its own plume of spray. The Seahawk is already overhead, rotor wash hammering the water flat beneath it as the crew tracks the next 3 boats in the same approach corridor. Through the nose camera, armed men are visible in clear detail. Life vests, headsets, wrapped faces, one man kneeling behind a mounted weapon, another lifting a tube-shaped launcher and trying to steady it against the violent movement of the hull. Too late. The helicopter's door gun fires in a tight burst. The rounds walk across the boat's bow. The launcher disappears in splinters and spray. The hull hooks violently left, collides with its own wake, and nearly throws 2 men overboard. 5:53 local time, the entire swarm reacts, not by retreating, by splitting. Some boats swing wide, forcing the escorts to choose between immediate threats and potential flanking runs at the formation's edges. Others accelerate harder, gambling that speed and confusion can still crack the outer defensive ring. The sea ahead of the carrier becomes a live grid of intersecting wakes, every line carrying intent. Then the first rocket comes. It launches from farther back than the others, from a boat masked within the middle layer. The smoke trail is brief and ragged, the weapon unstable from the moment it leaves the tube. It skips above the waterline, passes wide of the destroyer, and detonates off the port side in a low orange blast that throws spray across empty water. No hit. But that no longer matters. Everyone in the strike group has now seen what this is. On the carrier, the flight deck has transformed. Aircraft are being dragged clear of exposed positions. Yellow shirts move fast but without wasted motion. Ordnance crews lock down equipment. Fire parties and stretcher teams are already staged below access points. Nobody is waiting to find out whether the next rocket lands closer. One boat nearly does. It slips through the outer confusion and charges for the gap between the carrier and its portside escort. Riding flat and fast, 2 committed to turn without losing control. For 1 heartbeat, it appears capable of reaching the inner ring. It does not. The port destroyer pivots just enough to deny the lane, guns already trained. A short burst walks across the surface and strikes the boat's forward section. The hull lifts, twists, and erupts into a brief sheet of flame before collapsing back into the churn. Debris scatters across the water. The gap closes. 5:54 local time. 6 boats are now dead in the water, burning, rolling, or broken apart by controlled fire. But the swarm is not finished. It is adapting. The surviving Iranian boats stop driving in straight lines. They begin using offset angles, crossing each other's wakes, trying to overload visual tracking and test fire discipline. One group fakes toward the destroyers, another cuts closer to commercial traffic farther north, forcing the Americans to account for background clutter and clean firing arcs. Inside the Combat Information Center, the voices continue without pause. Track 23, armed. Track 09, maneuvering for stern approach. Track 12, possible second launcher. Recommend prioritize port inner group. The carrier captain hears all of it and gives nothing away. His ship has not changed course, not once. That matters more than it might appear. It means the center of the formation still holds. It means the swarm has not imposed its will on the Americans. But it has changed the shape of the fight. At the far edge of the surface picture, new signals begin appearing. Not boats, not yet identified. Something farther back, something beyond the immediate engagement. The electronic warfare team catches a heavier burst of emissions from the Iranian shoreside. Radar, communications, queuing activity. The boats were never intended to do this alone. Over the water, smoke from burning hulls flattens in the rising heat. The Seahawk rolls into another pass. The escorts continue firing in disciplined, brutal intervals. And the carrier keeps driving forward through the center of everything. A moving airfield, boxed in by speed, steel, and contracting seconds. The swarm has lost boats. It has not lost purpose. And now, with the first wave broken, everyone inside the American formation understands the same thing. This was only the door being kicked open. 5:58 local time. By now, the surface battle has settled into a rhythm. Not chaos anymore, not for the Americans. For the Iranians, perhaps. For the 30 boats that came in fast, split wide, and tried to saturate the defensive screen with speed and proximity, almost certainly. But inside the carrier strike group, noise has been converted into structure. Targets have numbers, sectors have owners. Every burst of gunfire, every maneuver, every warning call is part of a system performing exactly as designed. That is when the balance begins to shift in a way that cannot be reversed. Bridge, Combat Information Center. Surface picture stabilizing, recommend sector engagement by priority groups. Approved. The escorts stop reacting boat by boat. They begin fighting the swarm as a pattern. The destroyer to starboard takes ownership of the fast movers attempting to hook around the carrier's bow. The port escort locks onto the cluster, probing for a stern approach. The Seahawk remains overhead, no longer chasing individual hulls blindly, but marking the boats still showing intent to close the inner ring. That distinction matters, because once intent is isolated from noise, everything simplifies. 600 local time, the helicopter swings wide and then cuts back low over the surface. Through its optics, the surviving Iranian boats are no longer a unified threat. Some are still pressing, some are hesitating, some are clearly looking for a way to withdraw without making it obvious. The early aggression has been replaced by something less useful in close combat: doubt. One 5-boat cluster off the carrier's starboard quarter attempts to exploit the only remaining opening, an interval between the carrier's outer screen and the destroyer positioned forward. It is a precise move, tight, fast, timed to coincide with 2 other boats, making a distraction farther east. From above, the Seahawk reads it immediately. Air contact to surface action, 5 boats, vector 310, inner push, lead boat armed, rear boat trailing fuel or ammunition aft. Inside the Combat Information Center, the track numbers appear together on the same display. The destroyer does not swing aggressively toward them. It adjusts just enough to close the angle and preserve the firing solution. That small correction is the difference between professional execution and reactive panic. No wasted motion, no overreaction. Geometry, then the trap closes. The helicopter crosses first, hard over the lead boat's bow. Rotor wash blasting spray into the faces of the men aboard. They duck instinctively. That moment costs them their sightline and their timing. Simultaneously, the destroyer's guns open in a short, disciplined burst, directed at the lead hull alone. The boat disappears in spray and fragments. The second boat swerves left into the wake turbulence of the first, slamming down so hard off a wave crest that one of the men aboard is thrown against the mount behind him. The third tries to cut right and finds the carrier's security ring already there. Too close, too exposed. Nowhere left to go. A second burst walks across the water in front of it, then into the engine block. Smoke pours out immediately. The hull loses speed and begins to yaw. The remaining 2 boats break away. Not cleanly, one nearly collides with the disabled hull ahead, clipping across its wake so sharply that the boat skips and shudders. The formation dissolves in under 10 seconds. That is the moment the Iranian swarm begins to come apart. 6:02 local time. It does not collapse all at once. Swarm tactics never do. They fray. A few boats are still pushing aggressively from longer range, working to look threatening enough to hold attention. Others drift toward the edges of nearby commercial shipping lanes, using civilian traffic as partial cover against targeting solutions. One boat circles wide off the port side, possibly searching for an opening, possibly just trying to stay alive long enough to receive new instructions. But the central fact has changed. They are no longer shaping the battle. The carrier strike group is. On the flight deck, that difference is visible even to sailors without a tactical display in front of them. The opening minutes had the feel of a siege being absorbed. Now the mood is harder, quieter, controlled. Deck crews remain at emergency posture, aircraft still secured, damage control teams still staged. But the panic edge is gone. Men who had been watching the horizon for the worst outcome are now watching American systems function exactly as advertised. One petty officer looks out from the starboard catwalk as another Iranian boat breaks off and says quietly, "They're starting to feel it." He is right. 6:04 local time. One final cluster makes its decision. 5 boats, packed tighter than the others, driving hard for the slot between the carrier and the aft escort. It is the most dangerous approach the Iranians have attempted since the opening shots. If even a single hull gets through that corridor, the engagement could shift again. But the Americans have been waiting for exactly this. The Seahawk pins the lead boat with its optics and holds it there. The aft escort comes left just enough to narrow the corridor. The forward destroyer maintains pressure on the outer boats so they cannot support the push. Every American platform is executing a different piece of the same coordinated response. The lead Iranian boat presses in regardless. It gets closer than any hull has managed since the fight began. Then the escort fires. A short burst tears into the hull. The bow lifts, stalls, and crashes back in an explosion of white water. The second boat turns away almost immediately. The third overcorrects and slams sideways into the wake of the first. The last 2 never reach the line. They peel off while they still have the option. In less than 10 seconds, the last credible inner ring attack is over. 6:05 local time, Combat Information Center to bridge. Outer security ring re-established. That is the sentence the entire formation needed. Not because the danger has passed, because it means the swarm has failed. More than half the Iranian boats are destroyed, disabled, scattered, or holding well outside the zone that mattered. The carrier remains on course. The formation remains intact. The Americans have taken the fight away from speed and chaos and returned it to systems, discipline, and controlled violence. Then the electronic warfare operator speaks again. New emissions from shoreside, increased radar activity, possible cueing from coastal batteries or airborne drone assets. The bridge goes quiet, because everyone present understands what that sentence means. The boats may have been the attack, or they may have been the preparation for something else entirely. 6:07 local time, the sea is no longer full of momentum. It is full of consequences. Smoke hangs low over the water where the first boats went down. Broken wakes smear in every direction, crossing and fading. Remnants of a swarm that came in hard and fast and now looks scattered, damaged and uncertain about its own next step. Off the carrier's starboard side, one Iranian boat sits dead in the water, bow low, stern drifting broadside to the swell. Farther out, another is still moving but barely, trailing a grey ribbon of exhaust behind it. And through the middle of all of it, the USS Abraham Lincoln continues its transit. Steady, massive, unchanged in its direction. That is the detail that matters most. Inside the Combat Information Center, the surface picture is finally clean enough to read completely. Surviving boats are no longer converging, they are separating. Some are turning outward in pairs. Others are falling back alone, making their retreat look like deliberate repositioning. A few linger at range, too far to strike effectively, too close to be safely ignored. Bridge, Combat Information Center, multiple contacts opening distance, no coordinated inner push observed. For the first time in more than 20 minutes, that sounds like genuine progress. Not victory, not resolution, progress. 6:08 local time. Then one final cluster appears to make a decision. 4 boats, possibly 5 depending on the spray line, accelerate off the carrier's aft starboard quarter. It is not a full swarm anymore. It is a last attempt, small enough to move at maximum speed, large enough to be dangerous if the formation has loosened too early. It has not. The Seahawk identifies them first, already orbiting wide from its last pass. Optics lock before the boats fully commit to their run. Air contact to surface action, final group pushing from aft starboard. Range 1.6 nautical miles. Lead boat armed, 2 trailing close. The aft escort answers by tightening its angle just enough to deny the approach corridor. No dramatic turn, no overreaction. just the precise movement required to put steel and guns exactly where they need to be. The carrier holds steady, enormous, unreadable, moving through the channel as though the fight surrounding it is simply weather to be endured rather than a threat to be fled. That steadiness damages the Iranians more effectively than gunfire does, because swarm tactics only function when the target begins behaving like prey. The Lincoln never does. 6:09 local time. The final group comes on regardless. The lead boat rises and hammers across the chop, engine running at its limit, hull skittering across wave tops. Behind it, two others try to hold formation, tucked close enough to exploit any hesitation from the Americans. A fourth boat runs wider to the outside, perhaps carrying additional fuel, perhaps additional weapons, perhaps simply waiting to rush the line if someone else absorbs the first response. The Seahawk crosses the lead boat's bow first, low and hard, rotor wash smashing the water flat. The men aboard the Iranian hull throw up their arms against the spray. The escort fires almost simultaneously, a tight, measured stream reaching across the gap and striking the forward third of the hull. The effect is immediate. The lead boat yaws so violently left it nearly rolls. The second boat breaks formation to avoid it and finds itself isolated in open water with no remaining approach lane. A second burst strikes the surface ahead of its bow. This time that is sufficient. It turns out hard, wake curling white behind it as it abandons the run. The third boat hesitates. That single hesitation ends the entire attempt. Within 2 seconds, the group no longer exists as a group. One boat is crippled, one has turned away, one is drifting wide and losing momentum. The outer boat, watching the corridor close and the helicopter still holding overhead, breaks off before it enters effective range. The last serious threat to the inner ring is gone. 6:10 local time. Bridge, Combat Information Center. Final push broken, no contacts inside exclusion line. The bridge stays quiet after that transmission. Professional quiet, not because no one understands the significance of what was just reported. Every sailor on the bridge, inside the Combat Information Center, on the catwalks, and down on the hangar deck understands it precisely.